These are my African Nightcrawlers, and I'm going to be giving you an update on how they're doing today. So as you can see over here, I have bedding and food scraps, and over there I have the castings that needs to be harvested. I have been using the horizontal migration for about 6 weeks now to try to get most of the worms to move over, and hoping that in the meantime the castings here will dry out somewhat. So I'm pretty satisfied with how much at least the surface of it has dried out. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the castings, and then I'm going to be going through this so you can see what's going on with the worms in here. I know there are still quite a lot of worms over there as well. So it's quite a lot of worms in here. It's quite fluffy and nice though. So I'm going to be sifting these castings, extracting the worms and other undesirables, and then I'm going to allow this to stay in this container after I've sifted it for 6 weeks, and during that time I'm going to be baiting out whatever worms made it through the sifter and whatever cocoons that are in here that will hatch, because with the right condition the cocoons will hatch in 3 weeks. They can sit for up to 3 years without hatching if the condition is not right. So by condition I mean moisture, temperature, and they have to sense that there is food source available. Once these conditions are met, then the cocoons will hatch. Then I'm going to be putting a container in here with food scraps to bait them out. I'm seeing a lot of blue pieces of plastic. Don't know where they came from. Now I have 2 African Nightcrawler bin. Initially I had the large African Nightcrawlers in one and the smaller African Nightcrawlers in the other. But as I had one of them, the one with the larger African Nightcrawlers, out in my garage and the rest in the house, because I was testing to see if they could survive the winter in my garage. It is heated, but the heat is not evenly distributed in there, so that creates a problem. So a lot of the larger African Nightcrawlers that were in the bin outdoors, in the garage that is, didn't make it. Some of them did, but a lot of them didn't, so the population has been reduced. But I'm going to be showing you the size. I'm going to be going through and see what size I have. So I still have the 2 bins, but during the process of harvesting, after realizing that the larger set, most of them died off, I no longer kept them separated. When I was harvested, I combined both bins. Okay, so this is what I've harvested from this bin, and I have pretty much the same amount or a little bit more to harvest from the other bin. Now this side is a bit drier than it should be. It is still moist, but a bit drier than it should be, and the reason it is this dry is because using the horizontal migration while trying to dry out the worm castings itself, I realized that the casting was wicking the water because I was moistening this side but not the side where the castings was, and I realized that the casting was wicking the water from this side, so it just would not dry out. So I stopped moistening that side. So far I still have not seen the size of what they were initially, but there are lots and lots of African Nightcrawlers in here. I started off with 2 pounds. Both bins were in the garage. A lot of them died. I'm not certain how much I have now. I haven't been going through their bin a lot. I tend to just add the food, moisten the bin, and let them be, and then occasionally I will aerate the bin. Yeah, so like I said, so far I am not seeing any close to the size of the large ones that I got. Not even one at that size. I've had them now, August. The latter part of August is going to be a year since I've had them. Now, with African Nightcrawlers or any other worm that you raise, if you want them to grow large, like to their full size, you're either gonna have to have them for years, or you are gonna have to monitor them, separating the older ones from the younger ones. And a way that you can do that is by having breeding trays. See, they still have a banana in here that they haven't eaten. This I put in there for so long ago, but they have so much food. So I've gone through all of this, and I still have not seen any large size worms. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to feed this bin. I'm going to moisten it. I'm going to add some bedding, shredded paper and dried leaves, because I realized that they like African Nightcrawlers and European Nightcrawlers. These are burrowing worms, so they like when the volume in your bin is high. So for that reason, I'm going to be adding a lot of the dried leaves to about there. I don't want it to get too heavy, but since as I'm going to be adding paper as well, the leaves are light, but the papers can be quite heavy when they're wet. So that is the other way that you're going to have large size worms. You have to have enough content in your worm bin so that the worms have a lot of space, because the more space they have, the less restricted they are, the more they're going to reproduce, and the larger they're going to get. Now, as I was saying before, in terms of controlling the size of your worms, by using breeding trays, you're going to have a container that you keep empty. You're going to have your breeding trays. After you've put those worms into the breeding trays, and allow sometimes, whether it is 3 to 6 weeks, for those worms to mate and lay the cocoons. Then you're going to extract those mature worms that you had in the breeding trays, and that tray you're going to transfer over to the empty bin that you have. That way all of the worms that you have in that bin are going to be pretty much on the same size, same age group. So that is how you can control the size of your worms, ensuring that you don't have large and small worms in the bin at the same time. Yes, and by doing that you can control how much worms you also have in each bin. Now if you are doing this for personal purposes, then it doesn't really matter what size your worms are, because at the end of the day what is important is that they're doing okay, they're reproducing, and they are producing castings, and they're consuming your food scraps. But if you're doing it commercially, then you want to ensure that you control the size of your worms. Think about it. If you are doing commercial worm farming and you're not controlling the size of your worms, what is going to happen is that, for example, if you're selling a pound of worms, whereas you might be able to sell, say, for African Nightcrawlers that grow big, anywhere between 600 and 1,000 worms can make a pound. But the larger your worms are, the less worms you will have to sell, because the body size make up for the weight. So you end up having more profit. So in that case, you want to ensure that you control how your worms breed. So in my case, my African Nightcrawlers, I don't sell them. Maybe in the future, but for now, I'm not selling them, so I'm not really doing anything to control their size. I may in the future decide to sell them as pet food. In my region, they are not ideal to use as fishing worms because the waters here are super cold, and African Nightcrawlers don't do well in cold. So if you're using them as bait, as soon as you put them in that cold water, they will die very quickly in your garden. So this is part 1 of my update on how my African Nightcrawlers are doing. In part 2, we'll be looking at the other African Nightcrawler bin. So if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more updates on what's happening with my African Nightcrawlers, please take a moment to give me a thumbs up. You can leave a comment in the section below. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe and turn on your notification for more updates like these. Thank you so much for watching, and have yourself a wonderful day. Yeah man, a time for grow.